Hello everyone, welcome to this video. So as the PMP exam is all set to transition from its current PMBOK 7th edition to the PMBOK 8th edition in July this year, I know many of you will be trying to clear the exam within the next 3 to 4 months. And on the other hand, some of you might be thinking of waiting until July 2026 to take the exam in its new format, which is perfectly fine as well. Now, to help both of you manage this transition smoothly, I will be doing some bonus PMP exam questions and answers practice sessions like these over the next few months. And the intent of these sessions would be to practice the types of questions common within the exam syllabus, both for the current format of the exam and the new format of the exam. Because, believe it or not, even with this new transition, about 70 to 80% of the PMP exam syllabus will still stay the same. So regardless of whether you plan to write the PMBOK 7th edition or let's say the PMBOK 8th edition of the exam, these practice sessions, in addition to my regular monthly Q&A sessions, are going to help you prepare for the PMP exam with the right mindset. So 5 questions common across both the PMBOK 7 and the PMBOK 8 syllabus. Let's get started.
Right, so question number 1, guys. Okay, pause the video, read the question properly, and try to answer it before we solve it together. Okay, so let's start. You have recently been appointed as a project manager of a highly matured and efficient agile team. Okay, during a sprint review, you experience some discontent within your team members regarding the high lead time to obtain a necessary government permit. Now, since this is a government permit, this is a requirement that you might not be able to bypass or omit, okay, as a part of the overall project, because this is a controls and a governance issue. The team is of the opinion that this will delay the sprint and hence could be avoided. Okay, so that's a conflict in terms of the way your team is interpreting the requirement of this government permit. However, the product owner is of the opinion that the permit is necessary to roll out the project in a compliant way, as I was discussing, right? So there is obviously a conflict in terms of the way you or your product owner interprets the importance of this government permit vis-a-vis how your team is interpreting the importance of this government permit. How could you have prevented this conflict as a project manager? Okay, now a very important thing to consider here is, guys, the way this question is structured, because note that it is not asking you that what you need to do now as a project manager because the conflict has already happened, okay, but it is asking you that how you could have prevented this situation as a project manager. Okay, so it's something of a systemic fix which probably was addressed previously, could have prevented this situation to happen in the first place. Okay, so note that the question is asking you as a project manager to identify that systemic fix rather than trying to do a damage control now. Okay, so now let's look at the options one by one. Option A: ensure that the stakeholders from all departments attend the sprint review meeting. Now, this is a very broad option, guys, and I hope none of you have selected this, okay? Because primarily ensuring that all the stakeholders from all departments attending a sprint review meeting is not something which is recommended, because then you might need to address a big team of 15, 20, 30 people sitting in a meeting of a sprint review where most of the members in the meeting doesn't have anything substantial to contribute. Okay, because a sprint review meeting is only focused to the core project management group or your core agile group, right? So that way option A is definitely incorrect. Let's look at option B. Ensure that the product owner and the team members shares issues and concerns while working collaboratively. Okay, now that looks like a systemic fix that if from day one you would have ensured that the product owner and the team members, they are sharing and working collaboratively to understand the requirements and the needs of the project, then this difference of opinion with respect to the government permit could have been avoided now. Okay, so let's hold this option for now. Mark that we are not marking option B as correct at the moment, because we still have option C and option D to evaluate and accept or reject on solid grounds. Okay, because if you have seen this video already, you know that how important this is as per the positive bias principle that we have discussed in the video. Now let's look at option C. Ask the product owner to provide rationale of the permitting process to the team in the sprint review meeting. Now, this is a very interesting option, guys. Look what this option is trying to hint at. It is trying to say that, okay, this issue has already happened, and now in the sprint review meeting, the product owner is trying to provide a rationale of the entire permitting process to the team members. Okay. Now, what is this? This is a reactive way of solving this issue. Okay. But if you look at the question stem, what it's asking, it is asking that how you could have prevented this conflict as a project manager. Notice that it is not asking that what is your next step as a project manager now in this situation, or what you need to do now in this situation as a project manager. Okay. The question is asking you to think about something which, if was done previously, would have totally avoided this situation from happening. Okay. So that is the reason why option C is also incorrect, guys. Okay. Because it is hinting at a solution which is reactive and not proactive in nature. Let's look at option D. Require the team to update the impediment board and tackle this issue as a story point. Again, this is something which has been coined incorrectly, because in terms of solving an issue, you use root cause analysis techniques or problem solving techniques, right? Story points are something which you use when you are gathering requirements as a part of your agile project. Okay. So theoretically also this option is incorrect, and strategically also, since you are updating the impediment board now because the issue has already happened, this is a bit of a reactive approach, and that is the primary reason why option D is incorrect, guys. Okay. Please note that how we have looked at each and every option and analyzed them critically before we accepted or rejected an option. Okay. So this particular skill of option analysis would be very, very, very important for your PMP exam. Okay. So the correct answer to this question is option B, which is to ensure that the product owner and the team member shares issues and concerns while working collaboratively from day one of the project. And that is a systemic fix which you could have done as a project manager to avoid this situation from happening now. So question number 2, guys, please read the question and try to answer it before we solve it together. And again, you can pause the video here if you wish to. Right, so let's start solving the question together. During the implementation phase of a project, the product design team came up with some new requirements which were missed during product design. Okay, these requirements are mandatory for the client and would significantly impact sales and profits if not taken into consideration. Okay, also, since these requirements were missed initially, this may now involve a major overhaul of the project scope and business case. Okay, so the three things to note here is this is a significant potential impact on the sales and profits, might involve a major overhaul of the project scope and also of the business case in the end. Okay, which action should be taken by the project manager? So let's start evaluating the options, keeping the positive bias principle in mind. Okay. Option A, perform a triple constraint analysis, which is an analysis of the cost, schedule, and scope of the project, keeping quality at the epicenter. Okay, so that way, if you are evaluating the impact of this additional requirements, it is a good step because it is the basic first step when you are evaluating a change request, okay, or a potential change in a project. So this option looks very promising to me. Okay, so let me hold this option for now. Option B, review the business case to check continued business justification of the project. Right, so this option is also very interesting, guys. Okay, and you know why? The question is mentioning that there might be a major overhaul of the project scope or the business case. Okay, now you might argue that the project might not exist in the end. Okay, and you might need to shelve the project. What would happen if that case? Okay, so option B might be true, that you need to review the business case to check the continued business justification of the project. Okay, so let's hold this option as well. Review the project plan to identify risk responses. This is incorrect, guys. Okay, so you directly definitely do not jump into identifying risk responses without doing a proper impact analysis, correct? So if a proper impact analysis is not done, how will you identify which is the proper response? Okay, so that is why option C is incorrect. Option D, plan to fund an additional scope using the project contingency reserves. Okay, so this is also incorrect, because without doing an impact analysis or without understanding where this change is going, you cannot just go and issue the contingency reserves to fund this additional scope. Okay, so that is against the change management principles. So option D is also incorrect, right? Now if we come back to option A and B, guys, look very closely at option B. Okay, it is saying that we need to review the business case, which is okay, but you notice here that the question stem is saying that this may now involve a major overhaul. Notice this word may. Okay, it is not saying that this will now definitely involve a major project overhaul. Okay, now what is that thin line of difference between the may and the should, right? The difference is the triple constraint analysis. As long as you have not done a good impact analysis, you will never be able to tell for certain whether this change will definitely involve the project business case to such an extent that you might decide to shelve the project in the end. Okay, so that way you are jumping a step and you are directly assuming that this change will cause an impact on the continued business justification of the project, which will be incorrect, because as of now you have not done any triple constraint analysis on this issue. Okay, so the correct answer is option A.
So if you are finding the session helpful, please press the like button and subscribe to this channel, PMP with Ray. It's surprising that more than 70% of you who watch these videos on this channel are not yet subscribed, okay? So your support to help this channel grow will be highly appreciated. And now let's move on to the next one.
Okay, so question number 3, guys. Pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before moving forward. This should be quite a straightforward one for you. Right, so let's start solving the question. Step number 1, read the question and try to categorize it as a type 1 or a type 2 question. You have been inducted into a project as the new project manager following the resignation of the previous project manager. You are committed and motivated to lead the project team and to direct them in the right way to achieve all the success metrics defined by the customer. What should be your first step? So if you see the stem of the question, guys, I hope you have watched this video on my YouTube channel already. This is a typical type 2 question which hints to a sequence of problem solving. Okay, now with that in mind, let's evaluate the options A, B, C and D, and let's see which one is the correct option. And while evaluating this, we will keep our positive bias principle in mind, which means that we'll not reject any option until and unless we have found a solid reason to reject that option. Okay, option A, reassess the project schedule to check if that is realistic for project delivery. Okay, now this is a bit of a off track option, guys, because you are coming into a project as a new project manager, and of course schedule is not the first thing which you check. Okay, probably it is a good idea when you are coming to a different team or a new organization. It should be a sensible approach to first understand what the project is, right, rather than jumping directly into the schedule or maybe into the cost and try to optimize it. Okay, so that is a very childish way of doing things. So for that reason, option A is incorrect, because definitely schedule is not the first thing which you do as part of an onboarding when you go from team A to team B in a project. Next, option B, plan to perform a team building exercise to motivate the project team. Okay, now team building exercise, motivating project teams, they are important, guys. I'm not saying that they are not, but this is not the first thing which you do when you move into a new team as the project manager. Okay, what is the sensible first thing which you do if you are moving from one project to another project, guys? You should first take your time and understand what the project is before jumping into, let's say, motivating teams, before jumping into understanding the cost structure and understanding the schedule structure, etc., etc. Okay, so that is why option B is also incorrect. Option C, Review the project charter to understand the success metrics and associated risk. Okay, now we are talking, right? Reviewing the project charter. What does a project charter do? It talks about the scope of the project. It talks about the risks of the project. It talks about the funding allocations of the project. So it is essentially a birth certificate of a project, and it captures all the summary details which a new project manager need to know when he or she is inducted in a team as a project manager. Okay, but still we'll not mark option C and move on to the next question, right? We will still hold option C and evaluate to see that if option D is more correct or incorrect. Okay, so let's see. Review the learn from experience notes left by the previous project manager. Okay, again, this is not the first thing you do when you get inducted into a project. Because let's say, logically speaking, guys, if you don't understand the scope of the project, you don't understand what the project is actually planning to deliver, right? The final product of the project, it is futile to start learn from experience of the previous project manager because you will be missing the whole context. So again, you are jumping steps, right, which you shouldn't do as a good project manager, and that is what the whole essence of sequence frameworks are. Okay, I talk about these sequence frameworks more in my Udemy courses. So if you are already a student in my 35 PDU Udemy course, you know that I have dedicated an entire lecture in terms of helping you understand what these sequence frameworks are. But anyways, logically speaking as well, guys, as I mentioned, learn from experience notes is not the first thing which you refer to when you want to do a onboarding of the project. Okay, at least you go and start speaking with the sponsor, speaking with the stakeholder, start talking with the team members to understand what concerns and impediments they might be having, etc., etc. But in essence, you first understand what the project is all about. Okay, so for that reason, option D is incorrect as well. So the correct answer to this question is option C, which is to review the project charter to understand the success metrics and the associated risks in a project. And this is the most sensible option to go for as a new project manager who has been inducted into the project. Right, so question number 4, guys. Pause the video, read the question properly before moving forward. So this is a multi-select question, okay? So please be aware of that. Right, so let's start solving the question together. During the chartering process of an end-of-line automation project, the sponsor advises to automate the quality sampling process with the help of collaborative robots. Okay. Accordingly, a subscope is defined by the project manager to develop a prototype and confirm the reliability of the same. Okay, so basically, whether the cobot will be able to do the quality sampling process as per the reliability metrics which has been designated in the project requirements. Okay. However, the department quality manager is not ready to support the project since she believes that this will lead to layoffs within her department. Now, this is a very valid concern by the quality manager because if it was the technicians from her team who were doing the statistical samplings, now if the cobot is installed, what will happen to their job, right? So there may be layoffs. So her concern is quite significant. Now let's look at the question. Which of the actions are suitable for the project manager in this scenario? And it is specifically asking you to choose two options from option A, B, C, and D. So in these type of multi-select questions in your PMP exam, it will categorically tell you that how many options you need to select. Okay, so you have to select two options which are correct from A, B, C, and D for this question. So let's look at the options one by one. Plan a meeting with the quality department manager to align expectations. Seems like a reasonable and a sensible option to me. So we'll hold this for now. Okay. Option B, redraft the business need of the project with the sponsor. Again, it's a very fleeting option, guys. Redrafting the business need means you are essentially saying that, okay, hold on, let's look at the project once again and redo the whole business need of the project because one of the stakeholders have raised concern. Okay, so now that's not a very sensible approach as a project manager. Okay, and again, as this option hints towards escalating things to your sponsor without even taking the ownership of trying to solve it yourself first, this is an incorrect option. Okay, option C, perform a benefits management review supported with cost benefit analysis. So this also looks like a reasonable option to me, right? Because you are doing a benefits management review and you are supporting your analysis with data, right? Which is a cost benefit analysis. So as a part of your cost benefit analysis, you can provide a recommendation or a risk mitigation strategy that if there is a chance of layoffs, what can be the redeployment strategies of the technicians who will be no longer required in the role, okay, or in the quality sampling process role, okay. Now, not having a role in a company doesn't necessarily mean that the person should be fired, okay. So the person can be redeployed to a different team, different organization, okay, different function. So there is a lot of possibilities that can be explored if you do a proper cost benefit analysis around the topic of layoffs which might happen due to a automation. So we'll hold option C for now as well. Option D, engage human resource to create a plan to avoid any layoffs. Okay, now that is also a nonsensical option to me, guys, because of two reasons. Number one, it is not a core scope of your project to develop a plan for layoff mitigation. Okay, that is for HR to do, and that is something which is an administrative and operational activity rather than a project activity. Okay, now, remotely, you might say that engaging human resource at the initiation stage of a project, because the project is just getting chartered here, might be a sensible approach, and I can agree to that. But in the end, you need to understand that for these kind of questions, you have to identify the two best possible answers, okay? And we have already got that, right? So option A and option C are two best possible answers, or let's say more relevant approaches which you can take as a project manager, which is in line with your project scope. Okay, so that way the correct answer to this question is option A and option C, and option B and option D are incorrect options. Question number 5, guys. Please read the question and try to answer it before we move forward. Also, please note that this is a multi-select question. So let's start solving the question together. During a sprint review meeting, one of the team managers reprimands her subordinates in a disrespectful manner. Okay. This has made the atmosphere in the meeting quite tense, and you, as the project manager, need to tackle this situation and get the review meeting back on track. Which actions should you ideally take in this situation? And it is asking you to select two options from option A, B, C, D, and E. So let's start evaluating them one by one. Option A, remind the team manager about her roles and responsibilities. Incorrect. Okay. Again, a classic example of an answer choice which is in no way linked to the project scenario. Option B, calm the atmosphere in the meeting by providing a short lecture on emotional intelligence. Okay, all nonsense, guys. Okay, you can do this lecture talks in the meeting, but at the end of the day, you need to ask the question that whether you are taking one step forward to solve the problem at hand rather than doing some generic stuff. Okay, so option B is also incorrect. Option C, reiterate the team ground rules and provide some time to each of the team members to present their opinions and concerns. Looks like a quite holistic option to me. Okay, so I'll hold this option for now because this option looks at the multiple aspects of servant leadership, which is reiterating the team ground rules, providing time to each of your team members to voice his or her opinion. Okay, so thereby giving a freedom of speech, etc., etc. Okay, so a lovely option which takes into account the servant leadership principles. So I will hold this option for now. Option D, perform an MBTI assessment on the team manager to understand her motivators and dissatisfiers. Okay, again, it's a pretty generic option, guys, but let's hold it for now and let's look if there are any better options that are available. Okay, now having an MBTI assessment, understanding the motivators of the team manager might help you in the long term, but let's see and evaluate which action should you ideally take in this situation where you need to get the review meeting back on track, right? This is your problem at hand. So any option you choose should be a step towards solving this problem, okay? Not a generic or a overarching problem of the project, okay? Let's look at option E. Facilitate the meeting by asking team members to suggest ways to resolve the points of conflict. Again, it's a good option, guys. It touches the element of conflict management for servant leadership where you are facilitating. Okay, so you are not directing and solving something by yourself. You are facilitating the meeting and you are approaching the whole situation in terms of managing conflict. Okay, so option E is also a nice option which could be considered in this situation. So the correct answer to this question is option C and option E, guys. Okay, and A, B, and D are incorrect for the precise reasons as we have discussed for this scenario or in this context.
I hope you liked the video. Please press the like button and I'll see you again in the next one.